Now we'll welcome to the stage for our next panel our moderator. Helen Rosner is a James Beard Award-winning journalist, former national editor of Eater.com, and she is going to usher us into a new era of hospitality with another fascinating panel. Thank you, Helen. Welcome.
This one. Hello. I'll stand over here until I'm done introducing everyone. As Mitchell said, I'm Helen Rosner. I'm a writer and editor here in New York, and I'm extremely honored to get to share the stage in just a moment with three titans of the world of hospitality. So please come on up. André Terray from Le Tour d'Argent in Paris. Raffaele Alajmo from La Calandre in Padua. And of course, Danny Meyer, the CEO of Union Square Hospitality and Shake Shack, which I understand you all had for lunch. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
So we have a lot to talk about, the new era of hospitality. I think we're gonna hit on some of the same notes that you guys have heard in the previous two presentations, but we're gonna focus very specifically on the experience of what hospitality means in the current era, in terms of the tools that we have at our disposal, how diners have changed, how restaurants have changed, how the power dynamics of restaurants have changed. So maybe to kick things off, to set up some baseline expectations for all of us, each one of you could tell us what you think hospitality is right now, specifically in a context of how it has changed in the last few years. What is hospitality now that it wasn't before? Danny, you want to kick us off?
I think in many, many ways, I got to pull a Will right here and just say how great it is to see all of you here in New York. So thank you for that. It's a pleasure to be on this panel. I think we make a mistake thinking that hospitality has actually changed, because hospitality is and has always been and will always be a hug. If you want to get it, you got to give it. And I think that when you go out to dine in a restaurant, it's the same thing it always was, which is people want to feel like you're happy to see them, and they want to feel like you provided a customized experience for them. So it's not just a transaction, they give us money, we give them food. It's a transaction where in return for the money they give us, they get a big hug, and the food was kind of free. So in many respects, I don't think that hospitality has changed. I think what has changed, and I know this panel's largely about the confluence of technology and hospitality, is that if you think about the various stakeholders along the way, us, our guests, journalists, the communities we're in, et cetera, we've been given tools to know even more about our guests than we ever had before. The old days we would take notes on a 5x7 card. You would live in the restaurant every waking hour, live upstairs from the restaurant, never take a vacation. And, through online reservations and a whole host of other means, we have no excuse to not be able to customize the hospitality experience. And the more customized it is, the less of a dollar transaction it is. So that's for sure something we should get better at. For the guests, I think technology has provided a big smokescreen. There's too much information about too many places, too many people writing about it, too much confusion as to where I should spend my precious fewer than ever moments in my life. And at the end of the day, when I go to a restaurant, none of that mattered. The tweets, the Instagrams, the Yelps, the TripAdvisor, none of that mattered, because once I'm in the restaurant, I want the exact same thing that I wanted 30, 40 years ago, which is put something yummy on the plate, something delicious in the glass, and make me feel like you're happy to see me. So I just really want to say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose.
Okay, well, that's the entire panel. Raffaele, how has hospitality changed for you?
I not agree everything that is said. For me, the hospitality has changed. It changed a lot, and in this moment, the hospitality is on stage. The restaurant, the kitchen is very, very. All the people pay a lot of attention of the hospitality. Why? Why? Because the world now is on the cloud. Everything is on the cloud. Everything is unmaterial, is digital. And what is we need something that is true, that is something that connects everybody. That is the cuisine, the kitchen, and the food. We need something that is natural. And so, about the digitalization, the socials give a lot of information. That's too much. But I think that step by step, now we are in a new era, and we will find the right solution about that. And all the people have a lot of information of all the restaurants. Change also the importance of the guides, the newspapers, because everyone have information about restaurants. If you are in, I was in cruise in Croatia, and no Michelin guide, no, I don't know nothing about. I was looking for a restaurant. What do you do? Now, you Google it, you find restaurants in every part. So, with this information, you can have important advice, suggestions, pictures. You can imagine situation, emotions, but after you have to go.
Andre, you are the steward of a 400-year restaurant legacy, so presumably things have changed a little.
I can't describe the last 400 years, but I'll try and describe the last 10. Hospitality is a word that has actually a very large meaning, and we're more restaurants, hotels, but if you look at the meaning of the word, it's really welcoming someone. And for quite a long period of time, if you compare it to fast-moving consumer goods, for example, or buying something on Amazon, which can last at the most maybe a minute and a half. And we're lucky to actually have our customers with us for a quite long time. And timing is of the essence. In our restaurant, it can be anything from an hour and a half to actually 4 hours. So it's actually a fantastic opportunity to win your customers, obviously, opportunity for mistakes. But if you do things right, it's extremely rewarding. And at the end of the day, hospitality is definitely, and I think it's been said just before, is a very creating human relationships and using food and wine, which are great tools to get there.
Well, so all of this seems to depend a great deal on knowing who is in the dining room, whether it's, as Will was saying, reading your diner, reading the room, or as Danny was saying, just sort of being able to do research. How important is it to you and to your restaurants to know who is in the dining room at a specific level versus thinking more broadly about kind of an ideal diner or an ideal mood?
Well, we actually, we obviously use the computer systems to know how many times the customers have been here, and we try to keep track of what they've had. But we have to admit that sometimes we do Google them. It's important, and it actually was a little bit politically incorrect at some point. Now it's a little bit more accepted. But it's just very important to know a little bit their background, where they're coming from, which country, are they a surgeon or anything like that. Anything that can help us tailor the experience just a little bit more and decide if we want to do so or not, because then it all depends. You have to be extremely psychological and read your customers. I think that's been said before. But it's very important to know as much as you can. The greatest customers we can get are actually recommended by friends, sending them to our restaurant and giving us the information beforehand. They are coming to your restaurant, this is what they like, this is what they expect, this is how they're like. And then we have as much information as we can actually do our best job.
How do you encourage people to do that? If I had a fantastic meal at Le Tour d'Argent, how would I know that I should call you up if one of my friends comes?
Well, I think it's quite natural. It's a long-standing tradition, and we've had it countless times. I've done it with other restaurants. Quite recently, I called. There was actually a reservation for Bocuse. I didn't make the reservation, but I called them and I said, "You're going to have this customer is going to come on this date, and you should know this of them." And the person on the phone right away understood what I was bringing to them, because I had no interest or commission or etc. Just helping them, and I would hope, and they do the same with us. Same thing with the concierge at the hotels. They're very important for us because they can provide us with a lot of information about the customers that are coming to our restaurant.
Raffaele, we all Google, right? I think we can sort of, do you guys Google your customers?
Yes. Sometimes my restaurant managers do that. We get information from the concierge of hotels. We have from some guests. A lot of reservation from our colleagues, because they call us to make a reservation, and they think that we are more or less travel agents because we pass a lot of time to make a reservation for our friends or for our guests. That's true. I agree.
Is it possible to have too much information?
When I start to work, I remember an history about the St. Moritz Hotel. That was is a very important hotel, Palace Hotel in St. Moritz. And they told me that the restaurant manager have a keys about a room. In this room, there are all the dossier of the guest with all the information about wife, second wife, third wife, sons, lovers. So it was very secret. And when a Metro Hotel finished and arrived another one, he need a backup and improve for all the information for all the guests of the hotel. I started to do something about that, to talk, not to do, with my restaurant managers, and we decide that is for the privacy is not very easy to put in a file all the information that we see in the restaurant. So I think that someone can understand very well this problem. And so the information that you can find through Google are free. It's all right. All the other information, I think that have to be in the professionality of the staff of the restaurant.
Danny, is there specific information that you find particularly helpful in knowing what a guest is looking for?
There's an enormous amount that we find helpful, and I agree with everything that we've heard just now. I think that people are living very public lives. One of the nice things about a restaurant versus a hotel is that I think that dining out is a much more public act than where you sleep at night, and with whom. And so I don't think we've ever felt we've crossed the line. If you have a social media platform, which most people seem to have these days, you are telling the world a lot of stuff about yourself. And we've learned some interesting things about people. If you're starting off with, how influential are they? And do they spend their time praising the experiences they've had in life? Or you'd be surprised. We've gotten complaint letters, I'd say 95% of them are completely legitimate. But every now and then you'll see, you know, when you get a complaint letter from somebody, you will, and they tweet it or they Instagram it, you'll go online and see that they are a professional complainer from, you know, the last 3 years. They're complaining to airlines, department stores, hotels, restaurants, and that's useful information to just have that perspective. Doesn't mean that we didn't make a mistake. It just means maybe we don't have to fall on our sword for that particular circumstance. So you know, we've had guests come in, and we've read their biography, and we've read that amongst their biography, you might learn that they had a really rough last year, or that maybe they lost someone in their life recently. I know that may sound extreme, but all of those pieces of information are, I think, going to help us do a better job of customizing the hug once they do come in. We've also met people who don't want a hug. And for them, hospitality is leaving them the hell alone. That's useful information because I've seen servers and maitre d's bend themselves this way and that way trying to make someone happy who is actually happiest when they're unhappy. And so I just think you cannot have enough information. All that said, there's nothing that replaces what's in your heart, which is that whether you have information or not, you are wired and motivated to make sure that that person is happier when they leave your restaurant than when they first came. That's where it starts and ends. But, you know, I've been watching the baseball playoffs the last week and a half or so, and it's one thing to have baseball players who were born with incredible athletic natural ability, but the champions are the ones that do study the pitchers, that do study the pitchers who do study the hitters, who study who's got weaknesses and strengths. And I think those guys give themselves an edge. And I just don't see why, in the face of having that kind of information, we who are wired to be professional hospitality athletes wouldn't want to also, you know, really develop the techniques to take it to the next level.
How about the other side of the coin? So it's information on guests is easy to get and abundant in the world, but it's also the case for diners that information on restaurants is available in greater detail and greater concentration than ever before, and not filtered through the gatekeepers of an earlier era, whether it's a critical entity like Michelin or like a promotional entity like a tourism board. People can go to places like Yelp, to TripAdvisor. They can check out the tag page for a restaurant's Instagram. How closely do you pay attention to what other people are saying about your stories?
Well, we pay very close attention, actually. It's a great mirror of our job and what we're doing. It's rewarding also, most of the times. And then if sometimes it gets a little bit out of hand, then it usually points out to something interesting, whether we agree or not. The important for us and is to keep a legitimate distance in regards to our own identity and DNA and vision. But it's a great tool. Statistically, the amount of information, the amount of reviews we get on our restaurant makes it very interesting, makes it valuable. So we definitely keep a very close eye at what's being said. That's for sure.
Do you ever respond, or do you hop in the comments?
We started doing it. Honestly, it was taking a lot of time. We should do it more. That's for sure. Then what is most important during the day? Is it responding to customers online or spending time with them in the dining room? I would say the latter.
Raffaele, do you pay
Yes,
attention?
We do a survey. And we take a note if we have a bad report. Sometimes happen. So we go there to understand if we did a mistake or if is a guest that is a particular guest.
Mm-hmm. Do you pay attention? You read your own Yelp?
Well, I read 100% of the ones that come directly to me, and then with respect to all the other ones that exist in the world, we use a service called Venga, V-E-N-G-A, and they pull from probably 5 or 6 different social media sources, all the ones that you would expect, and they bring in they kind of give you the monarch notes. They distill what the essence of the report was. You can always go deeper if you want to. But then what we do with those is that the managers of the restaurant are responsible for responding, both saying thank you for the good ones and trying to rectify the bad ones. And then we go a step further. If one of our staff members earned a big rave, they're going to get a note from their manager based on that report as well.
So it really translates directly into active change.
Yeah, I just want to say that is an area that has changed. The thing that hasn't changed, it's always been human nature to be much more excited to spread bad news than good news. And the fact that there's now a public forum that you don't have to have any training You don't have to spend a penny to have a megaphone that could go across the world if it got picked up. Encourages people, I think, to be what they always were, which is occasional good news, especially when it comes to Instagram, which is people's opportunity to take a glorified picture so that all their friends can get jealous of where they were. But then it also gives people who want to spread bad news, which human nature has always wanted to do, an even bigger platform. So the benefit to us, even though none of us wants to have our dirty laundry, promoted to the rest of the world, the benefit is that that person was feeling those things anyway, before social media or after. It's helpful to know what's out there, because then at least you can address it.
Has the way that you address it changed? Now that even the responses can be public, sort of every interaction is perhaps not an intimate interaction. It has the potential to be recounted on Twitter or broadcast in a follow-up Yelp review. Do you feel that the way that you've conducted yourselves or the way that your staff has to conduct itself has shifted?
Not that much, actually. Not long ago, we would actually receive letters, and we still receive maybe 1 or 2 a year. So this is the equivalent. And we obviously pay attention to what we say and how we respond. So I don't think it has changed much. It's just the way it's coming along. It doesn't need a stamp to get to us.
So the actual experience in the dining room has also changed dramatically with technology, specifically thanks to the advent of iPhones, which are the new most commonly appearing utensil on the table, I think, for almost every diner. How do you feel about iPhones in your restaurants?
Well, I have to admit, again, 5 years ago, we were not looking at them as the greatest thing in the world. We thought it was interrupting the customer's experience. It was in between the customer's eyes and his dish. It was destroying their conversation. There were many flaws in our opinion, and there still are. Yet, it makes our establishments accessible to everybody in the world, and there are most probably customers that are never going to come to a restaurant that will enjoy maybe in some remote place in the world that maybe don't have the budget, and that will enjoy those 5 seconds of gastronomy just by looking at a beautiful dish that our chef has created, or a fun picture, or a wine tasting, or anything like that. So it makes our establishments accessible. And we have now actually included the Instagram and the Facebook and the Twitter on the menu. Sincerely, I would have never done that 5 years ago.
But now restaurants are I had a meal not too long ago at a Terra here in New York, and I pulled out my phone, and as soon as my server saw me pull out my phone, he whisked a special iPhone pillow next to my plate to just. And I felt, I always feel terrible for pulling up my phone in the middle of a very expensive tasting menu meal, but it was a beautiful communication that it was welcome.
There's a French blogger. Her name is Hélène Clément, and she said the cell phone is the new fork.
Yeah.
And I think that was especially true.
I was actually thinking it would be nice to have a serrated edge on my iPhone. Just use it as a steak knife while you're at it.
The Chinese said that the first eat iPhone after you.
Well, I was struck by something that Mitchell had said a few days ago when we were speaking about this, that sometimes you're cooking for the table of 2, and sometimes you're cooking for the table of 2 and their 400,000 Instagram and Twitter followers. Do you know that, do you get a sense through your research when you're cooking for 1 versus when you're cooking for 1 million?
We don't.
No? Is that on purpose? You want to stay in the dark?
Maybe in the future. It's interesting. I never think about that.
I've ruined it for you forever. We're going to blame Mitchell for that one.
But I have to increase my staff to have some fighters that check every reservation to find the followers. It's not easy, but
yeah, you can figure them out. The numbers are public. I don't know, Danny, do you feel like the mood in the dining room has changed now that you stop, the plate drops, the phones come out, and then the conversation begins and the eating begins. Has that changed the way you
I think
about the flow?
it does represent an additional distraction. But as I was saying earlier, I really think it's the exact same thing it's always been. From 1985, when Union Square Cafe first opened, almost exactly 32 years ago this week, I would always try to teach our team the exact same thing I try to teach today. It's just more distracting, which is watch every table, and when you see everybody's eyes bisecting the center of the table, that means we're doing our job. That means that they're engaged with each other and the food and the drink. The minute you see somebody looking up, maybe they need something, maybe they're admiring a piece of art, maybe they are looking to see, why hasn't their friend come back from the restroom, whatever it happens to be, when you see someone looking away from the center of the table, you have an opportunity to make something better or maybe inject some hospitality. Now today, that looking away from the center, there's one, maybe four more if there's four people at the table. We've all seen parties of four all looking at their iPhone at the same time. My guess is we have something to do with that because we're not creating an engaging enough moment at the table itself. So once again, even though it's not something that I'm excited about, it does, if you look at the positive side of it, if they were bored, this is now a really, really blunt indication of that boredom. Or if they're disappointed, this is a blunt indication of that disappointment. That means it's our opportunity to go make it better.
Do you find that you can read a table using iPhones?
Not using iPhones. I think it takes years of experience. I think my managers are better than me first, and that's our first job, and the iPhones are not going to change that. Our first challenge, and I've heard it. I thought it was earning informality, as Will said earlier, was just the perfect sentence. Is we need to have this let go moment, this lâcher prise moment. And iPhones, I'm not sure they're helping with that, actually, because it actually takes the work of a nice, kind maître d'hôtel, of a fun lady sommelier who's playing around and finding the right bottles and pouring the wine, etc., etc. It takes the whole atmosphere. Obviously, a glass of champagne helps, that's for sure. And the nice, for the first few amuse-bouche, the whole setting, this whole ambience, the first few moments in a room are so important. In a restaurant in Paris, we don't have any music. We're never going to have any music, and it's really the first few. When I come in the room, I can feel if there's an atmosphere. And the greatest thing is when we have actually a large party, a party of 6, a party of 8, a party of 10, a party of 12. It actually creates the atmosphere for the entire room, because the other tables suddenly don't realize that they're not talking, and they can hear this one table creating the atmosphere. And so many times we've had tables of Brazilians, Americans, South Americans that they're having a great time, and when I come to them, they're like, "Are we too loud? Are we too loud?" I'm like, "No, this is just great," because it's creating the atmosphere. And the day we have to put in music, it's going to be a failure because we have not created the atmosphere.
All right, I will feel less bad about being a loud American in a Parisian restaurant next time.
What's happened? Have you never had a guest with the app to scan the wine label, all right, and ask to the sommelier the grapes of the wine, and check if it's correct, the price, and
that's an entirely new topic.
Very expensive, huh?
That's a problem. It's shopping for the best price on the wine menu. That's a little bit of a problem now.
Well, I think value in general has become a much more transparent part of a lot of diners' equations. When they're traveling, in particular, they're deciding where to go for a special occasion. If they're trying to build a trip around a particular meal, if they are in an area that has a density of fine dining, there's always this question of, if I'm going to spend $1,000 on dinner, where will I get the most bang for my buck? And that can often, I think, if you're a person who's experienced in fine dining, particularly if you work in fine dining, that can feel almost like a betrayal of the equation to think of it in such transparently transactional terms. In terms of the wine list, for sure, but there are lots of people on their blogs, on Yelp, on TripAdvisor, who will say, this meal is $800 for 2 people, but it includes the truffles, and this other meal is $800 for 2 people, but you've got to pay the $150 supplement. Have you noticed that diners are more value-minded when they are considering dining at your restaurant or when they come in the door? Has it changed the tone?
Depend of the restaurants. I manage different level of restaurants. In the fine dining, normally the price is a second problem, normally, for the guest of the restaurant. For the people that watch is the first problem. So we have all the menu, all the wine list in the web with the prices. Those are the prices. You decide if you come.
Danny, do you have a sense of people being more, maybe it's not everybody, maybe it's sort of a particular set of diner who is really interested
I agree with
in maximizing?
I agree with what we just said, which is that in our case, at a restaurant like the Modern or Gramercy Tavern, people are not going there with the hope and expectation of how much money can they save. That was never part of their equation. They wanted a night out to enjoy themselves, and it's up to us to make sure they leave there feeling satisfied and happy with their choice. I do think that there is price pressure in the huge category of restaurants that I think we've got several that occupy this area, like Union Square Cafe and Maialino and North End Grill, where there's an expectation that I want to eat really, really well, and I want to have really good wine, I want to have a really friendly server, and it's not a special occasion. And I now have probably 1,000 legitimate places, maybe not quite that many, but in New York City, quite a few legitimate opportunities to dine really well in that category. And there I do think that there is some pricing pressure. And I think that part of our industry has been pretty challenged recently because meanwhile there's very little pressure on our landlords to raise the rent. And, there's very little pressure on commodity prices to get lower all the time. So that part is a challenge.
It does seem like when we're talking about fine dining, the level of service and the function of hospitality is very easily considered part of the value. I think that diners are very excited to pay handsomely to be hugged, to use your term. But it is harder maybe in the mid-range to talk about the front of house service experience as part of what the diner is looking for. Do you, how do you?
Why?
I disagree with
You disagree? Oh, I love it. Great. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Go first.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Why?
No, I think people,
I ask you why.
I think.
Okay. Why am I on? I don't know. I mean, so in my slightly different experience, I think that if there is someone who is considering price, if you are someone who's price sensitive, you tend to be sensitive to the price about material goods. You're interested, like you were saying, in how much does this wine bottle cost at retail? How high quality is this steak? How
Yes,
much
but normally, if you go in the medium range, they have much number of covers. The turnover could be bigger than the fine dining. There is you have the rapport between the number of waiters and guests that is higher more in the 3 Michelin star, and a little bit lower. They run a little bit faster, but the quality of the service could be more or less the same. The attention of the guest.
I think the expectation is that you're going to get the hug at any price point, and that what you are spending less for is, one cut of beef as opposed to another cut of beef, chicken livers instead of foie gras, perhaps. But I do think that it's absolutely true that the fewer guests we are serving, we should have the opportunity to even customize the experience further, which should translate to even more hospitality. But, I've had many, many very positive reactions from people who go to a place at the Museum of Modern Art called Cafe 2 that serves 1,000 people.
Could be a difference is also if you are in a fine dining with one menu, that's all the people have to do the same, and the restaurant that have a la carte. This could be a big difference, and also in the balance in the balance sheet, in the fine, in the turnover. If you do a fine dining restaurant with just one menu, and you have a la carte, you have a 20% difference of food cost, or not?
True, and I guess all I was just trying to say is that whether you're serving 1,000 people or 100 people, the person serving you, it doesn't cost me as an owner anymore if they look you in the eye and smile. Not a penny more. And so that gets down to who did we hire and how did we train them? How did we train them? So we should be able to deliver that. It's not going to be quite as customized and refined, obviously, but it can still feel really good.
Well, how has that transitional process been for you as managers, as people with employees and staffs and people who've been with you for a very long time, changing their expectations and raising their level of comfort with the changing expectations of diners, bringing your team on board with the idea that the iPhone is a welcome part of the trajectory of the meal as opposed to something that we should be rolling our eyes at. Have you had any pushback with that?
Well, I think we've actually talked a lot about listening to our customers, and I think we all agree on everything, and I'd like to talk about not listening to our customers. Especially this panel was a little bit on technology and what it can do to actually improve the experience. And we have a reservation system. We all do. Ours is called Guest Online. We can kind of force people to put their credit card so that we can get the pre-authorization to reduce no-shows, etc., etc. And we've also implemented time slots so that we actually can reduce or can spread the evening, which is much better for the dining room staff and the kitchen. And for us, it's extremely important. And it actually it allows us not only to get some cleaner information, because the customer is actually putting himself the name on the computer, and now everyone is used to it, thanks to the airlines and the hotels, etc. Otherwise, we would have to have the customers on the phone, and sometimes you don't get the name right, or you have him repeat his name. So it actually improves the experience. And we had also many customers that were calling us, and as much as we love our customers, sometimes they really want to share their life on the phone. And we would love to have time for them, but at this precise moment, we just cannot. Because we have other customers calling, and it's just not improving their experience, in our opinion. So the internet and online reservations is there very important. In terms of time slots, we also had recently the experience that we actually force our customers to reserve at 7 p.m., 7:30, 8 o'clock, 8:30. On the phone, would we tell a customer, I'm sorry, but we only have a table at 7? We would get into trouble. On the internet, surprisingly, it's not a problem. And they would actually give us a call if they are 15 minutes late. I'm sorry, I'm running late. I know I have a reservation at 7. I'm so happy to have a table. And suddenly we're actually putting the customers in a little bit of a straitjacket and not listening to them that much, and we're actually improving the experience.
Because they're more willing to be yelled at by a computer.
Because they cannot yell to the computer. It's not going to yell back.
They'll listen to what the computer has to say. So you've welcomed those changes. Were you worried about introducing that element?
Oh, yeah, it's a process. It's a process, especially in France, where putting your credit card is not that easy. It's coming in little by little, but it's really improving the situation. For example, the pre-authorization for us is very interesting because it's actually maintaining the contact with the customer. If a customer would not show himself with no credit card, nothing like that, he would never call us back. He would be convinced that he's on a blacklist, and we would have ruptured the relationship. Whether if we have his credit card number, he's going to call us for sure. If he doesn't matter, we're going to charge him, and he can live his life, and we have 200 euros in the bank. So we're happy with that. But he's going to call us, and whatever his excuse, we don't care. We're going to give the money back because it's our interest, and it's not our business to charge him. But he has called us back. He's happy about that. And we're happy to have him on the phone. Thank you very much. when are you going to visit us again? So this little straitjacket, interestingly, is actually maintaining the relationship with the customer. So I thought that was an interesting experience that we didn't really expect that, but it's important.
Danny, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. It feels like that doesn't feel like a hug. How do you feel about the idea of imposing more constraints through things like online reservations?
It's funny you ask that because about 1999 or so, we started hearing about these online reservation systems for the first time. We already had a garage invented electronic reservation book at 11 Madison Park and Tabla. They couldn't take reservations online, but it did allow us to pretty much digitize our file system. And when I first heard about these companies, there were about 5 of them hitting the scene. I was the guy in our company that said, "No way, not now. It's not fair to our guests. One of our, greatest assets is how nice our reservationists are. Everybody's even happy when our nice reservations say, 'I'm sorry, we can't take 2 of you at 8 o'clock.' We can't give that up." And I'll never forget my partner, Richard Corain, said to me at a certain point, he said, "Listen, Mr. Hospitality, last time I checked, hospitality is when you're doing something for the other person. And if someone else is choosing to make their reservation online, who are you to say, no, you may not? Who are you to tell someone in Paris, you should know what our business hours are, even though we are 6 hours earlier than you? Why wouldn't you just give those who want to do it the opportunity and then have a telephone for those who want to do it that way?" So not only did we get with the program, but I ended up going on the board of Open Table to help them to make their product friendly for restaurants. And I think it's the greatest thing that's ever happened, both for consumers who want to use it and for restaurateurs. It never satisfied the promise we hoped it might have, which was that we would be able to eliminate this enormous cost of having reservationists, many of whom are paid to confirm reservations, to say, no, I'm sorry. I wish we could kind of have it both ways, but I think that it's fantastic, and there's a whole lot of new systems that have been developed over previous years. We're experimenting with one, Resi, at Union Square Cafe right now, and it can do things for us that we never thought possible before. It connects to the Apple Watch. So, for example, we can have a manager working in the dining room who can get a text that the Rosner party is running 15 minutes late, and then the waiter doesn't have to feel rushed on the previous table to get them out of the restaurant without anybody having to run up and down the steps or have one of those, awful headsets, which I think look like a concert hall rather than a restaurant.
Do you take online reservations, Raffaele?
Of course. And we are going to invest a lot in this direction because we have new ideas about. We have our own reservation system, and we developed 4 years ago a Carpe Diem is like the airlines company. So if you buy the tasting menu in the fine dining 6 months before, you can have 50% of discount. So we did this for example, lunchtime or the period that we know that we can do this discount, and they pay 6 months before. After 5 months, if they do 5 months before, is a little bit less, till the old price where you arrive close to the date.
That sounds a lot like what happens sometimes with Talk, where there's basically, high value tables and high value times are priced differently than, say, the harder to fill time.
An empty table is an empty table. So we are not in Manhattan. We are in Sarmelo di Urbano, is close to Padua. So it's not the same. But we work a lot in dinner time. Sometime the lunchtime we work, but maybe lunchtime we have some table that's free. And this one is also an opportunity to give the possibility of young people to come. and the people that don't have a lot of money. And we have now a repeaters guest every 6 months that come for the tasting menu.
And they always use the discount?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Fantastic.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages to developing your own system like you do, Raffaele, or using a system that is someone else's, Danny, something like Resi or OpenTable, where you can't necessarily control the interface for Resi or OpenTable, but you can build yours from scratch?
Well, we did it because when we start, OpenTable, the fork, la fourchette doesn't exist in Italy. There wasn't. There was the
Quandu. Don't you have one called Quandu?
Quando, I don't know.
That's good.
It's good.
It's Italian.
Now?
Yeah.
No, not 10 years ago.
Not 10 years ago, that's true.
The problem was the timing. When we start, it was too early.
Right.
So we start with our own system. Now we are we have all the restaurants under our own system, but in Paris we are talking also with La Fourchette, fork, just to understand how they work, to take away the problem to answer the telephone, because in Paris it's normal to have the reservation online. And the reservation online is also fantastic because it is the answer, you have immediately the answer. You don't, if maybe you call a restaurant, please hold the line because you have to wait. I think is a very good opportunity.
Yeah, you get immediate feedback. You don't have to worry about.
I think the benefit to a larger platform is that the restaurant is part of a network, and from a marketing standpoint. So, for example, if I had in my mind to go to Le Calandre, that's where I want to go, right? But if I'm walking around Manhattan and I've got my iPhone with me, which everybody does, and I can go to, let's say, OpenTable, and OpenTable knows exactly where I am because of the geolocator. It knows all the restaurants I've ever reserved at, and so it knows my taste, and it can immediately populate my phone in descending order of proximity to where I am that minute with where I can dine. Now, if I'm going to Padua, I'm going to see you. And so that's what I just told you is completely irrelevant. And if I were you, I would also have my own.
We have this is the difference about the destination restaurant or a restaurant in a destination.
You don't need to be part of a
Right.
big network, whereas
we-
I think most
we have-
restaurants can benefit from that.
We are in Venice also. And in Venice, the people plan the trip month before. Maybe not the restaurant, maybe. First is the hotel, everything. And after they walk, but is not Manhattan. It's not Manhattan.
So, Andre, you said that people are willing to be much more receptive to the constraints that you give them when they're making online reservations. Have you found that people are also more willing to put in special requests and talk about their limitations? We're certainly living in a golden age of special requests and dietary restrictions.
Of course, it's not only a constraint. It's improving the information because they receive the confirmation by email. They can reply to the email and modify their reservation without having to call us, whether it's at night or if they're abroad. They can obviously share if they have any dietary requirements or any special requests, whether it's a table situation or a special dish they want. So we actually, I feel that the future is actually going to lead us towards much more tailored experiences. And the ideal restaurant would be for customers to actually pre-order everything, and that's already happening in many restaurants, but we haven't done it yet. But we would love, whether it's the dining room or the kitchen, to have the entire room pre-ordered and know already what we have to serve. So the only thing that customers have to do is sit down, and then we're taking care of them. The greatest thing that we do, and I think all the greatest restaurants here, I think we all do it, is off the menu, hors carte. And some customers are quite customary with that. And they call us, I said, there was this amazing dish that I had like 5 years ago. Could you ask your chef? And we actually love it, because then the chef has actually to work on it. He's going to reinterpret it a little bit. And it's very interesting for the team. And it's quite an exciting moment. We had this actually last week. A customer wanted three specific dishes from our restaurant. It was a poire parisienne. There was a canton Marco Polo with green pepper. And there was a special, the quenelle, but old style. So the chef actually worked on it. As soon as we know it beforehand, we can do that. The problem is actually customers that actually sit down and say, well, I want to have this dish, it's not on your menu, then it's just absolute hell for everyone. Especially if it's a very important customer, because then we actually have to find a solution. And it does happen to all of us. So yeah, I think the more we can tailor the experience, the more interesting it's going to be for us and the customer.
How have you been able to tailor experiences differently, Raffaele, using the technology at your disposal?
Well, to have all the order pre-ordered is a dream, I think. But
catering.
Let's just, we
because
can line it up, make it
then
it's not catering.
Then he won't fight all the receptionists. He won't fight all the maître d'hôtel. It's good. So no, I think that we can increase the offer. We can increase the offer. We are working around, for example, in Venice. We have our restaurant is the only restaurant in St. Mark's Square. We have the tables overlooking the square. All the people came for an anniversary, and they would like to ask the table on the window. So we are working on give the possibility to book the table that they want, for example. So this is one
incredible development to choose your specific table. I would love that. Please do that.
Yes.
That would be great.
And also maybe if their anniversary is something, all things connected to organize a special dinner.
Different prices for the tables or same prices?
No. We are working on different prices.
I mean, it feels like we're moving more and more.
We do that because normally we do twice in a year. We put 2 different prices in a year. You can do also in your restaurant. You have the table on the corner.
They're the same prices.
No. Yes, I know. But what do you answer to your guests that come? Why they are sitting this table and I'm here?
Yeah, but there's a God above me that decides on the table sitting.
Imagine. Yeah. Sometimes we.
You'd actually be very good at running an airline with the pay in advance and the price is lower, pay for that seat and the price is higher. Got it.
Well, you say airline. I mean,
food would be the best ever.
And you have the answer, right? You get the money and you have the answer.
It seems more like it's the theater model, right? I think when Nick Kokonis was developing Talk, he talked a lot about how he wanted to price seats at a restaurant like seats at the theater.
But I think what you bring is even more important, is that I would love to have the entire room pre-ordered with different dishes, not the same dishes for every table, because people can
like
have really tailored it. But I think then we're talking, the dream is actually prepayment.
Sure.
If you go to a theater, it's the exact same scheme. I mean, we have a troupe de théâtre. We have a staff. We have 30 people in the kitchen and 30 people in the dining room, which are ready to play their piece. There's no reason why in the future we shouldn't be paid in advance like the theaters are.
So what's stopping you?
Because I think I don't know in France the customers are not ready. That's for sure. But it will happen. I think it has started in the US. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's the case at a number of restaurants. Are any of your restaurants prepay?
No, and I don't think we will be, because I agree that it's a theatrical model, and I think that if you are going to have a theatrical dining experience, you would understand this. It's 4.5 hours of your night. You're going to watch a virtuosic experience. But I think that 99.9% of restaurant experiences are the joy of spontaneity. And I think people have more fun actually when they don't have to pre-order. We've done that certainly for New Year's Eve or that type of thing. But there's something fun as a guest when you go to a restaurant and you see a dish as you're walking to your table that you never even saw on the menu. You ask the maitre d', what is that? I've actually done that on the way to my table, and it starts to get me excited about what I might order. Or you're sitting down and you see food. You know, I love a server who's smart enough to walk by me with the food at the next table right at my eye height. and they must love it when I order that because they know that they hit the jackpot. Same with wine. I just think there's something fun about that moment of the table deciding together, and they order envy when you didn't quite get the right thing, but the guy across from you did. So I would feel sad as a patron of restaurants and also as a patron of restaurants to see that part of our equation go away.
Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you, Helen.
Andre, Raffaele.
Thank you so much. Thank you for Les Grandes Tables du Monde. Thank you, James Beard Foundation, for the evening, and thank you also to all those who followed us on the live stream. Good evening.